Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we're going to be doing our final mock draft before the NHL draft gets underway next week. As with the draft underway just over a week's time, I want to give you my opinion on who I think will be going where as the draft sits at this point in time. So we'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello and welcome back to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Now, with the draft only a week away, I'm recording this on Tuesday, June 20th, so the draft at this point in time is a week and a day away, so it's not too far away. With the draft being that close, remember I'm doing a live video about the draft, so definitely check that out. I'll be starting it at 4 p.m. Pacific time or 7 p.m. Eastern time, so definitely check that out. In about a week's time, I'll be giving you my live opinion on all of the picks and all trades that happen on draft day. But with the draft so close, I want to give you my thoughts on who I think will be going picks 1 through 32, in my opinion, at this point in time. Now, I already did this once before, just after the draft lottery happened. I gave you my top 16 picks. A lot of people really liked that video, so I thought I'd do one last one discussing who I think will be going 1 through 32. No, remember, not all of these are going to be exactly correct, not even the pick order. Given the fact that there's most likely going to be some trades that involve first-round picks before then. I mean, the Blues have 3 first-round picks, not sure if they'd be using all of them. The Canadiens have been rumored to be possibly moving Florida's first-round pick. There's a couple of other teams who have multiple first-round picks who could try and move one. You always see teams jostling up and down, trading down, trading up to get certain players, so it's definitely not going to be exactly the same with the pick order, but as it sits right now, I'm just going to give my mock draft for where everyone's picking at this point in time. So I've definitely looked at a couple of draft rankings, looked at some teams' needs, and given my opinion as to who I think will be taken 1 through 32 in this year's draft. So we'll start with number 1, the Chicago Blackhawks, and I have them taking, I don't think this is much of a surprise, Connor Bedard. Now, Bedard is a top-end player, a generational talent who would be an amazing fit for the Chicago Blackhawks. He's 5'9" and 185 pounds, so he's a smaller forward, but he's a really great playmaker. He's sort of like the best first-round pick since McDavid. He's a top-end player. He was breaking records in the WHL this past year. He put up 71 goals and 143 points in 57 games in the WHL with Regina last year. Definitely, he was an elite level forward. Now, whether he's a center or a winger at the NHL level, it's definitely to be seen, but Bedard's a high-level player. Definitely a really great player who's going to put up probably in the hundreds in the not-too-distant future at the NHL level. And he's probably going to be playing either center or wing on that top line for years to come for Chicago. So, in my opinion, I don't see anyone else being anywhere close to level Bedard, and if the Hawks do not take Bedard, I would be completely shocked. So, I definitely think that Bedard, who has been the consensus number 1 pick for some time now, is definitely still going to be a top-end pick. And generational talent like that doesn't come over too often, so I think the Hawks will definitely take Bedard number 1. Now, number 2, I think it's pretty safe to say that the Ducks will take Adam Fantilli at number 2. Now, the Ducks already have some pretty good centers, like Trevor Zegras, like Mason McTavish, but I can't see them pass up on a guy like Adam Fantilli. Fantilli was playing over in the NCAA this past year, had a solid season, putting up 30 goals and 65 points in 36 games, which was a solid point total, just under 2 points per game in the NCAA, which is really hard to do. Fantilli is 6'2", 187 pounds, so he's a bit bigger of a forward, and he would work really well as like a top-line center for the Ducks. So I think if there was no Bedard in this draft, he could still go on first overall and be one of the best first overall picks we've had in the last couple of years. While Fantilli will probably be second, he's still probably one of the top-end players over the past couple of years. Fantilli's a solid playmaker who should definitely be thriving in a top 6 role with the Ducks, and I think Anaheim picking him is probably going to happen. So I think while they do have a lot of centers, I just can't see him pass up on Fantilli. Number 3, I have Leo Carlson to the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's a really good center who has been playing wing a couple of times over in the SHL this year. Carlson, he's 6'3", 194 pounds, so he's a bigger type forward. He's a center. He can play wing if he needs to. He's been playing over in the SHL over this past year, putting up 10 goals and 25 points in 44 games. Carlson's a solid top 6 center. We know that the Jackets are looking for centers right now because they're a little bit weak at the center group. They do have a guy like Cole Sillinger, who I think in time could be like a second line center, and I think Carlson could definitely mold into a first-line center in the next couple of years. So if you have a top 2 center punch of Carlson and Sillinger down the center for years to come, you're set. So I think they'll take the big center in Carlson 3rd overall, and I don't think it's too surprising because I think most people at this point in time have Bedard, Fantilli, Carlson going 1, 2, 3 to Chicago, Anaheim, and Columbus. Some people might have Carlson going Anaheim. Some people might have someone else jumping one of those guys into the top 4. But for the most part, for what I've seen, that seems to be the most likely opinion, is 1, 2, 3, Bedard, Fantilli, and Carlson. So I definitely think Carlson would be a good fit in Columbus. Now, 4 is where it starts to get a little bit tricky. We know that there's a lot of good talent at number 4. In my personal opinion, I'm going to say that the San Jose Sharks will take Matvei Michkov. Now, I know this is what I predicted in my last mock draft, and I know that there's a lot of talk right now that Michkov could fall in the draft, just given the fact that he's got a long contract in the KHL and that he may not want to sign with certain teams and that he may be trying to force his way down the draft rankings and he may fall a little bit. But in my opinion, I still think that Michkov's a high-level talent. He's going to be one of the best players to come out of this draft. And when he comes over from the KHL, he's going to be a superstar. So, in my opinion, I do still think that San Jose should take Michkov. I wouldn't be surprised if he did fall a little bit in the draft and the Sharks went with someone else. But in my opinion, I am taking Michkov. Michkov, solid right winger. He's going to be a phenomenal player at the NHL level. He's probably going to be like maybe even a 40-50 goal scorer at the NHL level at some point in his career if he does come over to the NHL. And he's going to be a solid top 6 winger. And for a San Jose Sharks team who, if they move Carlson, would be definitely hanging down the road of a rebuild, I think they could wait 2 to 3 years for Michkov to finish it over in the KHL and have him come over. So in my opinion, while he could drop, and while the Sharks may go a different direction, I still think Michkov is the pick at number 4 for the San Jose Sharks. At number 5, we have the Montreal Canadiens. Now, this is my first change in my mock draft from previously, and this time I have them taking Will Smith, who's a center out of college. Now, for Smith, he's definitely been a really good forward, putting up 15 goals and 42 points in 20 games. He's a solid center. He definitely projects to probably be like a good second-line center at the NHL level. He's 6 feet, 172 pounds, so he's on the bigger side. I think Smith at the NHL level could be definitely a huge puck-moving, playmaking center who can definitely help and maybe create a 1-2 punch down the wing long-term with Suzuki. I think that could be a really good 1-2 punch. Now, if the Canadiens go out and maybe acquire a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois, maybe Smith goes to the wing at the NHL level at some point. But I still think Smith looks like he's going to be a solid top 6 forward at the NHL level. And I've seen a lot of people say that Smith is the most likely pick for the Montreal Canadiens. There's a couple of other possible options, like maybe a Ryan Barker, maybe Michkov if he falls, maybe a Benson, who I did have going in 5 in the previous mock draft, but in my opinion, I think Smith is the right choice for the Canadiens at 5. At 6, I have the Arizona Coyotes taking forward Zach Benson. Now, I know there's been a couple of other options here for the Coyotes, but I think Benson's probably one of the top-end players in this draft. He's a really highly skilled, speedy winger who's definitely been playing really well over in the WHL this past year. He's on the smaller side, only 5'10", 159 pounds, so he's not as physical as some of these other guys, but he's just great, speedy playmaker who can definitely help on the wing. Another connection that Arizona has, Arizona traded up last year to the 10th overall pick, and they selected Connor Geekie. Geekie was a teammate in the WHL this past year of Zach Benson, so they do have some familiarity there, and I think that if Benson was still available on the board at number 6, I think they would definitely try and nab him. I have seen Benson drop in a couple of draft rankings, but in my opinion, Benson's a solid, speedy playmaking winger who I think could definitely fit in well with Arizona in their top 6. So I have Benson going 6th overall to Arizona. At 7, I have the exact same player I took in the last mock draft for Philadelphia, and that's I have them taking Ryan Leonard. Now, Leonard is a solid top 6 right winger. I think long-term, he could fit in quite well with a guy like Cutter Gauthier. He's sort of a Philadelphia-type player who John Tortorella would love to have. He's 5'11", he's not overly big, but he's a guy who uses his physicality to the best of his abilities. He put up 11 goals and 20 points in 17 USHL games this past year, and he's probably still going to need to be in college for a couple of years' time, but when he comes in, I think he could be a long-term top 6 option, maybe even playing top-line minutes with a guy like Cutter Gauthier in the foreseeable future. So he just screams to me like a Philadelphia-type player, and in my opinion, I think he would fit in really well with the Flyers. So I have Leonard going 7 to the Flyers. At 8, I have Dalibor Dvorsky going to the Capitals. Now, I know some people have said if Michkov's still available at this point, Washington would take him. I would say that's definitely a likely possibility. I've seen some other people say different options for the Caps. I have them going with Dvorsky. Dvorsky's a solid center prospect who's been playing over in Allsvenskan over the past couple of years. He's 6'1", 201 pounds, so he's definitely not a smaller size forward. And I think long term, he could definitely fit into the top 6 as a second line center for the Capitals. We know that they could be looking to move Kuznetsov this offseason. We know that Backstrom has recently recovered from a serious injury over the past year, and maybe his career is starting to come to an end. Maybe not yet, but in the next couple of years it could be. So the Capitals need a long-term option at the center position, and I think Dvorsky could definitely do that for them. He's a solid center who could definitely be a good playmaker for some other players. He could definitely play with Ovechkin, maybe even towards the end of Ovechkin's career, and I think that could be a really good option for the Capitals. So I have Dvorsky going 8 to the Capitals. At 9, I have probably the first big surprise of the first round, and that is that I have the Red Wings taking Eduard Šalé. Now, Šalé was playing over in Czechia this past year, put up 7 goals and 14 points in 43 games. He's probably going to be a solid middle 6th winger at the NHL level. We know how the Red Wings' GM Yzerman is not afraid to go a little bit off the board to pick some players who he thinks has some really good draft potential. I know a couple of years ago he picked Seider, which was a questionable decision at the time, but given how Seider's morphed into a solid number 1 defender, I don't think anyone's questioning that decision now. So Šalé's another guy who's probably projected to probably be closer to the middle of the draft instead of the top 10, but I think could be a stretch here for Detroit to grab to be a solid top 6 winger in the not too distant future. I think probably going to need a couple of years to develop, but in time, Šalé could even possibly play on that top line with a guy like Larkin and Raymond. So I definitely think that that's a really good possible option for the Red Wings, and in my opinion, I think Šalé goes 9th overall to Detroit. At 10th overall, I have the St. Louis Blues taking Colby Barlow. Now, Barlow is a solid left-wing forward who's been playing over in the OHL over the past couple of years. Had 46 goals and 79 points in 59 games this past year, was one of the better goal scorers in the OHL, and he also uses his physicality to the best of his abilities. So in a couple of years' time when he's in the NHL level, given the fact he's a bigger forward at 6'1" and 187 pounds, playing with a smaller guy like a Jordan Kyrou could be beneficial to both players. I think Barlow could be a good goal scorer, could put up some solid goal totals, like 30-40 goals a season, and I think playing with a guy like Kyrou, who's a good playmaker, those two could work really well together. So in my opinion, for the Blues, I think Barlow would be a perfect fit here at number 10. At 11, I have the Vancouver Canucks, and I have a little bit of change for them too from my previous draft ranking. I have them taking Axel Sandin Pellikka. Now, Sandin Pellikka is a solid puck-moving right-shot defenseman who's playing over in Sweden. Now, we know that the Canucks have drafted a lot of Swedish players over the past couple of years, including Elias Pettersson. Now, Pellikka is not a bigger forward. He's 5'11", 181 pounds, so he's not one of the bigger, more physical defensemen that you'll find there, but Pellikka is still a solid puck-moving defenseman. He put up 5 points in 22 games in the SHL this past year. Looks like he's going to be a solid player in a couple of years' time, and I think if you have Hughes as your top pair puck-moving defenseman, you could have Sandin Pellikka as your second pair puck-moving defenseman who could definitely put up points. So I definitely think that could be a huge win for the Canucks at 11 overall to get Pellikka. At 12 overall, I have the Arizona Coyotes taking David Reinbarker. Now, Reinbarker is arguably probably the best defenseman in the draft this year. There's a lot of people who have him possibly going top 10. I think it's a little bit too high for him, so I still have him going high end in the draft, just not top 10. Reinbarker's definitely been improving a lot this past season. He's been playing over in the National League, putting up 22 points in 46 games. He's 6'2", 187 pounds, so he's a bigger, more mobile defenseman. He's sort of that mold that we saw with like Vegas players, where he's a good puck-moving defenseman, but he's got a lot of size to him. So I think for the Arizona Coyotes, who don't have a ton of defensive prospects, getting Reinbarker at 12 would be a perfect fit for them. And I think long-term, he could definitely be like a top-pair defenseman. At number 13, I have the Buffalo Sabres selecting Gabriel Perreault. Perreault's a little bit on the smaller side, not too much, but he's 5'11", 165 pounds, and he's definitely an elite-level playmaker on the wing. He put up 19 goals and 45 points in 23 USHL games this past year. He's definitely been a solid playmaker. I think in time, after a couple of years developing in college, he could definitely be like a middle six winger with the Buffalo Sabres. I definitely think he could definitely be a solid prospect on their forward group. So I know they already have a couple of decent prospect forwards, like Osland, Kulich, Rosen, and I think they add another one here with Gabriel Perreault. At 14, I have Brendan Yager. Now, I know Yager has been moving differently in the past a while in draft rankings. He could be going lower end of the draft. He could be going a little bit higher. I have him going at 14 overall. Yager's a solid center/right winger who could definitely be a good playmaker at the NHL level. He put up 28 goals and 78 points in 67 WHL games this past year. He's probably going to play there for another couple of years, but when he gets out, I could see him possibly play with a guy like Malkin on the wing, or if they want to use him as a center, they could probably get him as like their solid third-line center. So in my opinion, Yager's a solid option for the Penguins and would definitely improve that team, as they don't have an overly great prospect pool. So I think adding Yager to that team would be a tremendous upgrade for the Penguins. At 15th overall, I have the Nashville Predators selecting Oliver Moore. Now, Moore is a guy who a lot of people think could be going top 10. I have him falling just a tiny bit to Nashville. The Preds, long term, probably don't have Johansson and Duchesne in their picture. And there's not too many great center prospects they have with that team. So I think adding Moore could give them a solid top 6 center for the next couple of years. He's 5'11", 176 pounds, and he's definitely done really well in the USHL this past year, putting up 8 goals and 25 points in 23 games. So he's a solid center who could definitely work in the top 6 for the Predators. And I think long term he could definitely be a good top 6 center with Nashville. At 16th overall, we have the Calgary Flames, and I have them selecting Dmitry Simashev from the KHL. Now, Simashev is a Russian prospect, and just like Michkov, just like a couple of other Russian prospects, he could fall a little bit, so this might be a stretch to take him at 16, but a lot of people do view him as one of the top defensive prospects in the draft this year, along with guys like Pelika and Reinbarker. He's a solid left-shot defenseman, probably one of the bigger defensemen at this draft. At a height of 6'4" and 201 pounds. He didn't have any points in 18 KHL games, but he was a solid defender. If he can put up some points at the NHL level, he could definitely be a really good player. The Flames, in my opinion, don't have that many good defensive prospects, so adding a solid one like Simashev would definitely be a win for them. So I have Simashev going 16 to Calgary. At 17, I have the Red Wings taking Otto Stenberg. Now, Stenberg is another player who's playing over in Europe, over in the SHL, where he put up a goal and 3 points in 23 games. He looks like he could be eventually a solid two-way middle six forward who's definitely can put up points, but he's also pretty good defensively. He looks like a really well-rounded forward, and he's versatile. He can play center, he can play wing, so he's definitely a really good forward to have. And in my opinion, he will definitely fit well with the Detroit Red Wings in their top 9 long term. He probably needs a couple of years development, but in time I think Stenberg could definitely be a solid option for the Wings. So if he's here at 17th overall, I would definitely be taking him if I was Detroit. At 18 overall, I have the Winnipeg Jets selecting Riley Heidt. Now, Heidt is also a very versatile forward, can play center, can play wings. He's a bit on the smaller side, 5'10", 181 pounds. And has 25 goals and 97 points in 68 WHL games this past year. He's a solid playmaker. I think with the possibility of him being a good center, if the Jets do move on from Scheifele and Dubois, they don't have an overly abundance of great center prospects. I mean, they have Lambert who can play center. They also have Lucius. So adding another guy who could fit in that top 6 like a Height, in my opinion, would be a solid addition for the Jets. In time, you could definitely be like a top 6 forward playing with a guy like Lambert or Lucius. And whether it's the wing or whether it's center, he could be an amazing fit with the Winnipeg Jets. At 19th overall, I have the Chicago Blackhawks, their second pick of the draft. And I have them taking Andrew Cristal. Now, Cristal is a solid player who I had going in the top 16 in my last mock draft. I have him falling a little bit more here. He's a bit on the smaller side at 5'10" and 165 pounds. And he's put up 39 goals and 95 points in 54 WHL games. Now, a reason I have Cristal going here to Chicago is that he's really good friends with Bedard, and if Cristal is still on the board at the pick number 19 for the Hawks, I could see Bedard trying to have the Hawks take Cristal. Cristal's, once again, just like Bedard, a bit on the smaller side, but he's a good playmaker, and he could definitely be a good, possibly 70-80 point player eventually for the Hawks. So having a solid playmaking winger who can put up a lot of points, play in their top 6, and is a good friend with Connor Bedard, I think would be a solid addition for the Hawks. So with Bedard and Cristal being good friends, I could see Bedard try and persuade the Hawks to take Cristal 19th overall, who I think would be a good fit with the Chicago Blackhawks. At 20th overall, we have the Seattle Kraken. I have them taking another Russian-born defenseman in Mikhail Gulyayev. Now, Gulyayev was a left-shot defenseman, once again, not overly big, 5'10", 170 pounds, He's a good offensive producer who I think could put up some pretty good point totals. Not the best defensively, but I think for Seattle, he could definitely be a good offensive defenseman, which is something, besides Dunn, they don't really have in Seattle. He's put up an assist in 13 games, so he's a solid defender in the KHL. Like I said, once again, he's a defensive prospect, and the KHL might drop a little bit, but in my opinion, he's a solid prospect, and I think the Kraken would be good to take him here. The Kraken don't have a whole bunch of good D prospects. Like the past couple of drafts, they've taken centers in the first round, so I have them taking a defenseman in this draft, and I think Gliev could be a good fit with the Seattle Kraken. At 21st overall, I have the Minnesota Wild taking Nate Danielson. Now, Danielson, pretty big forward, 6'1", 187 pounds. He put up 78 points in 60 WHL games this past year. He was a solid point producer. He looks like he could be a good two-way center at the NHL level, putting up a lot of points, but also not too bad defensively. With the Wild currently looking for like a solid first-line center and in cap hell for the next couple of years, I think there's a good chance that the Wild try and get a top-line center who can help the Wild center guy like Kaprizov and Zuccarello in the not-too-distant future. I definitely think Danielson in time could definitely be a solid two-way NHL center, and playing with a guy like Kaprizov on the top line eventually could be a really good fit for Danielson in the Wild. So I think Danielson to Minnesota would be a perfect fit. At number 22, I have the Philadelphia Flyers selecting Matthew Wood. Once again, another college player. Wood, once again, probably a little bit closer to the middle of the draft, so I have him dropping a little bit here. But if he's available at 22 with the Flyers pick, I would definitely try and get him. He had 11 goals and 34 points in 35 NCAA games this past year. Was definitely a solid prospect. He's a bit on the bigger side, 6 foot, 390 pounds, right winger who, once again, loves to use his physicality to win puck battles and win battles around the net. So, once again, the Philadelphia Tortorellis type player. So, in my opinion, if they could get Wood with their second pick in the first round, that would be a really good win for the Flyers, and I think he'll be a really good fit with Philly. At 23, I have the New York Rangers selecting left winger Quentin Musty. Now, Musty, 6 foot, 290 pounds. He's been playing over in the OHL over the past couple of years, putting up 78 points in 53 games this past year. Musty's a really good top 9 power forward who I think long-term could maybe fit on like the third or second line with the Rangers. He's a really good prospect who I think could fit in really well with the Rangers game style, and I think long-term he could definitely be a really good prospect, so I have Musty going to NYR. 24, I have the Colorado Avalanche selecting Tanner Molendyk. Molendyk is not the best offensive defenseman. He's also not a big defenseman, 5'11", 176 pounds, but he's a really good, solid defensive defenseman who I think could definitely help the Avalanche long term. He did put up 37 points in 67 WHL games this past year, but I think long term, if he could be like maybe Cale Makar's defensive partner, defensive defenseman like him, paired with an offensive guy like Makar, I think could definitely work out quite well. So in my opinion, I think Molendyk is a really good option for the Avalanche, especially given the fact they don't have an overabundance of solid defensive prospects. At 25, I have the Nashville Predators with their second pick, selecting Callum Ritchie. Ritchie's been playing over in the OHL over the past couple of years. He put up 59 points in 59 games last year. It was a solid center prospect for the Predators. He's also a bit on the bigger side, 6 foot, 287 pounds. So I think in time, it could definitely be a solid like top line center for the Nashville Predators. And I think while Ritchie could go in the middle of the draft, I have him falling a tiny bit here. And I think in time, Ritchie could definitely be a solid top 6 center for the Predators. So a really good pick there if the Preds do pick him for Ritchie. At 26th overall, I have the St. Louis Blues selecting Tom Willander, who is a right shot defenseman out of Europe. Now, for Willander, he's the guy who could go earlier in the draft. I have him falling a bit here, going to St. Louis at number 36. He's a solid defender, 6 foot, 179 pounds. Now, this is one of the picks that I could see St. Louis trading. So once again, St. Louis might not own this pick at that point. But if the Blues do have this pick, Willander, I think, could definitely be a solid right shot defenseman for them. They don't have an overabundance of defensive prospects either. And after taking Barlow at 10th overall, taking Willander at 26th overall is, I think, a solid pick for them. Could definitely be a solid puck-moving defenseman, fit in their top 4 long-term. And after having no points in 2 SHL games, I think he could definitely go back there, develop a little bit more, and then be a good solid second, third pair defenseman in long term for the Blues. So I think Willander could be a solid option for the Blues at 26. At 27th overall, I have the San Jose Sharks. Now I have them taking a bit of a stretch here, but I have him taking one of the top goalie prospects in the NHL this year, and Trey Augustine. Now, Augustine's been playing over in the USHL, like a couple of these other players. He gone to 14 games this past year and put up some pretty good numbers, putting up a 2.34 goals against average and a 928 save percentage. He's definitely not an overly big goalie, but he could be a goalie who could be, at the very least, a tandem goalie at the NHL level, maybe even a starter. So, in my opinion, the Sharks don't have too many good goalie prospects, and if they take a stretch here with the second first-round pick to get a guy like Augustine, I think that would be a pretty good, solid option for the Sharks. So, in my opinion, I have them going with Augustine. At the 28th overall pick, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs. I have them taking Samuel Honchik, who was playing in the WHL this past year. Honchik's a good center/left winger, who's a really big forward, 6'4", 185 pounds. Honchik put up 23 goals and 56 points in 43 WHL games this past year, was a solid point-producing forward. Long-term, he could be a solid second-line center for the Maple Leafs, maybe playing long-term behind Matthews. And I think long-term, he could definitely be a really good piece for Toronto, and I have seen some people linking Honchik to Toronto in the past as well. So I think he's a solid player who could go for Toronto. At 29, I have the St. Louis Blues again, and this time I have them taking Daniel But. Now, But is another Russian prospect, so one who I've seen falling down to the late first round. He's a left winger, but he's a really massive player, 6'5", 203 pounds, who had 2 goals in 15 KHL games this past year. Probably still needs some work, but in time he could definitely be a beast in the top 9, putting up some points and definitely using his physicality to the best of his ability. So, in my opinion, with the Blues already have taken 2 players, they have the ability to take a risk on But as a Russian prospect. 30th overall, I have the Carolina Hurricanes, and I have them selecting Lenny Hamin-Aho. Hamin-Aho is a solid Finnish prospect. He's 6'1". He's a really good winger playing on the right side. He's put up some pretty good stats over in Liga this past year. 21 points in 51 games. Long term, I think he could definitely be a solid top 6 player, maybe even top 9 player, with guys like Aho or a guy like Nashus or Jarvis. I think he would be a really good young addition to the Carolina Hurricanes offense, and given the fact that the Carolina Hurricanes have drafted a lot of Finnish prospects over the past couple of years, I think he could be a good solid option for the Hurricanes. 31 overall, I have the Montreal Canadiens with their second pick in the draft, selecting Jaden Perron. Now, Perron is a solid playmaking forward, definitely on the smaller side, as he's 5'9", 165 pounds, but as they showed with Cole Caulfield, they're not really overly opposed to taking smaller sized players. He definitely had one heck of a season in the USHL, putting up 72 points in 61 games. And long term, I could see him be a good middle six winger who can put up some points, definitely setting up some of his line mates. So, in my opinion, Perron could be definitely a good late round option, and I have him going to 31 to Montreal. And at 32 overall to the Vegas Golden Knights, I have them going with Grayson Sachin. Sachin was a good, solid WHL prospect this past year over with Seattle. He was able to put up 58 points in 58 games. With a little bit more development, I think he could definitely be rounded out to a solid top 9 winger or center at the NHL level. And I think Sachin definitely looks like he could be a really good player with the Golden Knights. So I think Sachin to Vegas as the last pick of the first round would definitely be a solid option for the Golden Knights. But those are my 32 picks. A couple of other honorary mentions who I think could wind up being first round picks if some of these guys were to drop to the second round would be Oscar Fisker Molgaard, who could definitely be a good top 9 forward at the NHL level. Gavin Brindley, who could be a really good winger/center at the NHL level. Forward Charlie Strommel, who once again playing over in the NCAA in college, could definitely be a really good forward in long term as a top 9 forward. Alex Ciernik, who could definitely be a really good right winger in time, and then Cohen Ziemer, who could definitely be a really good right winger as well. So, in my opinion, those are 5 guys who we could keep our eye on to possibly be picked in the first round. But definitely, I think those are my picks for the mock draft, for my last mock draft of the season. Once again, I'm going live next week on Wednesday at 4 o'clock Pacific time, 7 o'clock Eastern time for the draft, so definitely keep tuned for that. Definitely, I would love to hear your opinion down in the comments. What do you think of my mock draft? Which players do you think should be higher in the draft? Which players do you think should be lower in the draft? Does your favorite team get the player you wanted? If not, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think about my mock draft, and love to hear what your opinion is about players going higher, lower, or some players who you think could go to a certain team. So definitely love to hear your opinion down in the comments. And definitely keep up to date. Probably have the next video on Thursday. If there's something significant, I might do another little video Wednesday. but for the most part, we'll probably have our next video on Thursday. And then also keep up to date. I'll probably be posting a little bit more over the next couple of weeks. And don't forget to stay tuned for Wednesday, June 28th at 4 o'clock Pacific or 7 o'clock Eastern when I do my live video. So definitely keep up to date with my channel, as I'll give you my latest opinion on all the news, rumors, mock trades, off-season plans, stuff like that. But definitely, that's all I'm going to talk about for in today's video. Remember to like this video. If you really liked it, remember to subscribe. I also do a blog. I talk about off-season previews, trades, rumors, all stuff like that. So definitely check that out. I have a link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.